I have Fredric Abramson today, and he has a company called Golden Thread Technologies. What he's going to speak about today and show us a nice little video is identifying the risk of injury to children through genetics and big data analytics. Fredric, tell us a little bit about it and go ahead and share your screen. Thank you.
Okay, a little background. I got into this because my students from Johns Hopkins, where I'm an adjunct in biotechnology in the master's program, came to me and said, Dr. Abramson, you have to see this paper out of Stanford. They gave 14 triathletes their genetic data and their injury rate went down 44%. I said, whoa,
Oh boy,
that's huge. That
that
means
is.
that it's actionable. But it isn't a one-trick pony. But I said, but there's an interesting problem. They said, what's the problem? I said, they're from Stanford. I said, if you're MIT, Stanford, and Caltech, you understand complicated things. Everybody else has to have the science put into a form they can understand and use without having to become scientists. So that's why I started Golden Thread. And the idea is simple. We know that the genes affect your risk of getting hurt as an athlete, as a child, as an adult. But you'll see the numbers in the presentation. But to just set it up for a listener, there are 65 million American athletes, amateur athletes in the United States. 6.5 million of them every year suffer an injury requiring medical attention. That's an epidemic. 1 out of 10 is an epidemic. And nobody wants to talk about it except you got to stretch for 5 minutes and wear a helmet. Thank you very much for sharing. That isn't enough. So what you're going to see is a presentation that I show parents of kids around the world. I've shown this over 1,000 times. And I show it to adult weekend warriors because I want them to tell me, is this something you would want to do? Because at the end of the day, technology is useless unless people want to use it. Okay?
True. Very true.
So we'll go to share the screen. I'm going to put it on. And so you know, and your listeners know, what's different about this, it is set to music because it's a teaching thing.
It seems like only yesterday I didn't have a clue. I stood alone not knowing where to turn. Now suddenly I look around, everything looks new. I don't know why, but I think I'm starting to learn. They call it understanding, a willingness to grow. I'm finally understanding, there's so much I could know. Until the day you came along, I used to just get lost. I only heard the things I wanted to hear. It always seemed like no one cared. Then you took the time. And now I look and everything seems clear. You've got me understanding. You've really helped me see. I'm finally understanding. It's meant so much to me. You've got me understanding. You've given me some pride. I'm finally understanding. You're really on. Got me understanding.
That's different, isn't it, Mike?
I like the music because it felt where the meaning and the emotions are tied to this data. So I think people will get that. There's a lot there. Certainly wanted to know that about that vitamin K because it's been recommended to take with vitamin D3.
Yeah.
And for COVID and whatnot. So this is showing up again. So that caught my attention. Could you go out and point a little bit about the data, just storify it a little bit as far as maybe some experiences you've seen and where your heart is in this work, why are you doing this? Because it's certainly an important thing, but what's driving you? And is this the most important thing you're working on today?
The most important. And what drives me is my career history has always been driven around solving problems. And I've been in business and I've been in tech and I've done a lot of stuff. But I've become aware through a lot of experiences that the world of science and genetics simply hasn't delivered the goods in terms of making life better. And the best
Right.
way to illustrate that was a statement made to me 45 years ago in a meeting in New York City by a CEO of a major company in a meeting of the MIT Sloan Fellows after lunch 2 weeks before Christmas, which means his lunch had certain liquidity to it, certainly. And yes, he gets it. And after he gives his talk, you get to ask questions. I put my hand up. He calls on me. I stand up. I'm Dr. Fredric Abramson from Health Management Systems. And he says, stop right there. Do you know what the problem with the American people is? And I shake my head, no. They want to die healthy. I went, shit, that's the home run. But that's not the punchline, Mike. He was CEO of Philip Morris, the cigarette company. You got it. I said, dying healthy is not the same as living. Why can't we use science to help people live well? And then my students at Hopkins 15, 20 years ago said, we finished the Human Genome Project. We can now look at the whole genome. It's time to bring genetics out of the dark ages into everyday life. Nutrition, losing weight, injury prevention, these are all things that are part of our world. These aren't nonsense. And it's like, this is what we can do to make a difference. And that's why I do this, because I don't want you to become a geneticist. I want you to say, I know that my genetic map has an impact on what happens to me, and that it can be related into actions I can take on what I eat, how I sleep, what I do to make my life better. Duh. That's it.
That's simplifying it, but it's also putting it on the plate so people can really start thinking about it. Why is it so damn hard to lose? Why is it just doesn't work for most people? What's the problem? And here you are sitting on the data analysis work, the genomics, everything coming together. One question comes to mind is, how much can AI actually really contribute to finding solutions? We see it in medical a little bit already, where it can diagnose things that doctors just simply can't see.
Let me give you the answer to that with two stories. That one where I used big data and one where I used AI, and early on. My big data story is I was asked by a professor at the University of Michigan to tell him all the scientific research on spontaneous abortion. And I read all the papers. I came at Gunnar, his name is Gunnar Yerstam. He's an OBGYN from Sweden. I said, Gunnar, I got good news and bad news. He said, what's the good news? Everybody said it's 25%. He said, what's the bad news? I said, they're all full of shit. Their methodologies are all crap. He said, can you solve it? I said, if I got the data. So I got vital records from New York City, 360,000 pregnancy terminations. This is the late 60s. That was my thesis. I analyzed the outcomes of 360,000 pregnancies to compute the frequency of pregnancy loss. The number I came up with was 75%, not 25%. Most of which in the first 2 months after the menstrual period, when I thought I was pregnant, but maybe my period was late. You know how that is.
Yeah.
In the 70s, a physician from Miami came to me and said, he said, you seem like a smart guy in computers. Can you write a computer system to identify the risk of getting infected on admission to a hospital? I said, tell me your data. And he showed me, I said, if the answer's here, I'll find it. I spent 8 months and I built a system that identified the risk of you getting infected on admission to a hospital. And in 3 hospitals, it pinpointed a cardiac surgeon who was wiping his hands on the curtains during rounds. Apparently, Pasteur had.
That's for real. Boy, that's for
real,
Fredric. That's real information, being able to dig down and find an answer.
Right. And so
that's
AI is a tool. And it's a tool that, given data, can begin opening up insight and understanding. And it's not a perfect tool. It's not intended to be the ultimate tool. It's a tool like Google Maps to guide you in the choices you can make but it can only get better with time. So to me, it's a data problem that you transform into something that is concrete and actionable, like for a kid. Have Johnny warm up for 7 minutes and stretch his legs, and have him do some exercises at home to strengthen his knee.
Very specific.
Very specific, because having everybody warm up, that doesn't work. If it worked, we wouldn't be having the problem.
Right.
It's going to be related to you and your body. Another thing, visual acuity is related to your risk of getting an ACL tear. So if you have a kid whose visual acuity is narrow and you put her or him on the field, they're more likely to tear their ACL simply because they don't see the field the same way. So now you got to see if they genetically are that way, or that this brain was trained that way. And how do you expand it using AR and VR? There's no simple school solution. There's nothing that applies in absolute sense. It's guidelines to give you a chance to take action that makes sense. That makes sense to you?
Yes, it does. It tells me something else here about AI, because I just picked up on the very specific things you talked about and be able to pull that out of data. I'm not so sure AI can do it without someone overseeing it like you, where you have the critical thinking skills, whereas the AI is still just taking in data and trying to extrapolate what's happening. And it's getting pretty accurate and doing a great job, but it still takes the person like you, the human brain really, that has the critical thinking skills that might take another, I don't know, 50 years to develop. Who
No.
knows if we are ever able to do critical thinking with an AI? It's hard.
We can do that as long as we understand we're not looking for absolutes. I use Chat
I see.
GPT because my daughter had a concussion. And I'll give you this example. I did a Chat GPT and I asked it, what genes impact recovery from a concussion? That's a real question, because her treatment providers, none of them know anything about genetics and recovery from concussion. And ChatGPT gave me a whole some of the stuff about there's this information and that information. And I started looking at the articles, and yeah, it said these genes affect how you can recover from a concussion injury. It's not perfect.
It narrows the field of looking for the answer, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It says, how can you, if, for example, girls are more likely to tear their ACL in a sport than boys. We already know that statistically. So if you have a girl going to play soccer, AI can begin saying, we know that doing this is more likely to cause an ACL injury. This position, girls in this position on the field suffer ACL injuries more than girls in a different position. You know, we have to avoid absolutes. We have to consider it as guidance. And AI can take the data from 1 million people that I will build in my user community and say, what makes a difference for 10-year-old boys who are playing basketball? And then because that begins focusing it down. That's something AI can answer without any question.
It's fantastic. I want to thank you for the slideshow. It was not only great information, it was entertaining, and it put a little bit of emotion in what making you think about things and how important this topic is. Certainly want to share it with others if they watch this particular video. I want to thank you today for the time.
I just want to let people know I value input and reactions, even from people who say, why the hell are you doing that? Because you don't get anywhere by only listening to people who love you on the work you're doing.
True. That's so true. Yeah. Yeah. That adds to your ability to have take the blinders off kind of thing. Look outside of your own view. Yeah, I get that. That's fantastic, Fredric. Yeah. Thank you so much for today. It was very informative and had a great time with you. Thanks, Fredric.
We'll continue more. Have a good one. Bye-bye.